Ari, I struggled with bracketology this week. Not so much at the top, because that Alabama win against Georgia, best win anybody's had all year. I had no problem putting the Tide at number 1, dropping Ohio State to number 2 because they haven't really played anybody yet. But then it got tough. Like, who wins the Big 12 and who do you put in that spot? And then my number 11, my last at-large team, I couldn't tell much difference between 11 through 20 this week, Ari. And I put Kansas State in there. I'm not super confident about it. It could have been Missouri. It could have been USC. It could have been Notre Dame. It could have been Michigan. Like, it could have been any of them.
Well, I was surprised that you went with a Big 12 team, Andy, because I think we basically said on the show on Saturday night that the Big 12 was just going to eat each other alive. And just like picturing Kansas State only losing one more time, even though I think that you could even have made the case that they should have been the 4 seed in this exercise, is just kind of a hard thing. It's like, I don't know if I believe that 2 Big 12 teams are going to make the field this year. But that said, like, how could I possibly grill you and give you a hard time when they're all indecipherable? And it's just like, what's the alternative there? Another team who suffered a terrible loss. So the hardest thing that I've had with the bubble watch, which we're going to do a video on later, but kind of a similar exercise in the sense of having to predict what the playoff is going to look like is, there've been a lot of clunkers in the sport this year, Andy. There've been a lot of clunkers. Teams have won some games. People have lost some clunkers. Is how do you view those clunkers in the context of like where you rank them? Because the thing that I think is interesting here is that you moved Miami off of the ACC champion at the top because they had a clunker on Friday night and theoretically could have lost had the refs had a change of heart or a different mood, in the last second of that thrilling game on Friday night. So like Clemson had a clunker, Penn State's had a clunker, Oregon's had 2 clunkers. There's a lot of clunkers to sift through, and I don't know if you can view all of them the same way or if you have a different outlook when you look at each team based on what you remember about those games.
I think every clunker is different, but we're just going to have to accept that you're going to deal with some. And the teams that make the playoff, especially the ones that are in the last 4 in, essentially, are going to have something that you just look at and go, yeah. And the Big 12 is a great example of this. So BYU still undefeated. I put BYU as the Big 12 champ in the 4 spot. Am I super confident in that? Absolutely not. Like, they took the huge lead against Baylor and then let Baylor come back. They did hang on and win that game, but I don't know that I don't think they're going to go undefeated in the Big 12 for sure. They play Arizona next. Arizona went to Utah, which we thought was, potential Big 12 champ, which still could be a Big 12 champ, and dominated Utah. But the last time we saw Arizona, they were getting dominated by Kansas State, who got dominated by BYU. I mean, and it's not just like that. That's the problem that I'm having with some of these, is not just that they lost, it's the way they lost. And I think we're going to have to deal with that, because there weren't many times in the 4-team playoff where a team with a loss had a horrific loss.
Right.
Usually a horrific loss knocked you out. A horrific loss may knock you out. Like, if you're a Big 10 or an SEC team, a horrific loss may knock you out of that potential 1 or 2 spot, but it's not going to knock you out of the playoff. Like, you're going to need a couple of those.
And I think that you're kind of finding that when you go through both of our projections, which were different, there are 4 or 5 teams who have already suffered blowout losses. Like, on one hand, in the ACC here, Andy, you've got Miami dropping out as the team that's going to win the ACC because they had a clunker that they won on Friday night. And then Clemson, who's looked good against overmatched opponents the last 3 weeks, got their doors blown off by Georgia. And it's like, well, which clunker was worse? I know Georgia looked pretty great on Saturday night, but how do you judge those 2 clunkers in the context of the season? And I guess you just kind of go by feel at this point, because it is funny. At the beginning of the year, when we were told we had to do bubble watch in bracketology after week 1, I was kind of like, that's going to be impossible. We have 0 context and no games to go off of. And I'm finding, as we do this every week, that it's getting harder with more context.
Well, but I do like now that I feel like I don't need to use the preseason expectations anymore. So that's why Ole Miss isn't in there. So if you looked at that and you said you had Ole Miss very high, you don't even have Ole Miss in your first 4 out right now. The reason for that is because Ole Miss hasn't beaten anybody good. They don't have a quality win yet. So until Ole Miss gets a quality win, I'm not putting them in. Now, if they go to South Carolina and win, I feel much better about putting them back in. But I want to use the results. And that's the same reason why I made Alabama number 1 and the SEC champ in this projection, because I just watched them beat Georgia. Now, it's funny because you can take what you want from that Alabama-Georgia game, like Alabama jumping on Georgia 28-0. You can take what you want for Alabama and for Georgia from that part of it. Georgia coming back and taking the lead. You can take what you want from that. And then Alabama immediately taking the lead back from Georgia. Take what you want from that. What I took is they're both really good. Alabama was the winner of a game between two elite teams. Maybe the rest of the season changes the way we feel about that, but I'm comfortable with that because it is a real result from this season, which is what the committee is going to have to look at. Now, they're going to get more context because they're not going to start looking at it until November.
Yeah. It is kind of an interesting thing that of all the things that you could gripe about if you're mad about who's number 1, and I've gotten that a little bit on Twitter already with my poll, what has Alabama done to be number 1? It's like, are you alive, like on earth? Like there's a lot of gripes here. Alabama being number 1, I thought was a layup decision. We both agreed on that. Now, as it pertains to who's out and who's in between 8 and 17, that's where things get really murky. And I have a really hard time, kind of trying to decipher between some teams that I think are going to be in the mix that aren't in your bracketology yet, Andy. Like, what are we going to do with Michigan when they keep on winning, LSU when they keep on winning, and USC if they keep on winning? And then also, if USC keeps on winning, that muddies the waters with Penn State as well. You've got 4 teams that have played each other who are similar, that are pretty indistinguishable right now.
I think if USC keeps on winning, it makes it a little easier. The LSU win will help, especially if LSU keeps winning in the SEC. The Michigan thing, I think, will solve itself.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about Michigan in another video. So if you're just cruising around the On3 Sports YouTube page, we'll have a Michigan video up as well. I think the Michigan thing could solve itself just because the lack of a dynamic offense is going to bite them in the ass as they go forward in some of these games. So, and remember, they have a very tough schedule going forward. They have to play Oregon and Ohio State still. And look, Indiana's not a gimme. Illinois is not a gimme. So they could have 3 more losses, and then we're not even having a discussion about them.
Yeah. So what was the hardest part about it for you though? Like when you did it, like what?
Number 11. I felt okay with everybody else. And the Kansas State one, I didn't feel super confident in, and I thought, okay, should I put a Big 12 team here? But the way Kansas State beat Oklahoma State was the only reason I put them here. Is they bounced back from a horrific loss. Remember, they have a quarterback who's a first-year starter. He had a terrible game against BYU. They bounced back. He was not making the mistakes he was making. And I'm going, okay, they learned something here. Now, we can say that, but remember, they get the week off. Colorado gets the week off, and then they play each other in Boulder on October 12th. Colorado, playing the way it played against UCF, can beat Kansas State. Like, we may have Colorado in here in a couple of weeks.
I'm actually super excited that you're going to be in my house for that day, because that game, that day is just absolutely pandemonium. And that game 2 weeks ago might not have been as juicy as it certainly seems right now, especially with Colorado. If Colorado wins that game, then I think you're going to start seeing their logo in these posts too. So like it was difficult.
Let's talk Group of 5. And I realize it's not a designated spot. I want to be clear about that. The Group of 5 does not have a designated spot. I actually did consider UNLV at number 11 here. And I was wondering how people might, view that if I put UNLV at number 11 and then I put an at-large team at number 12. But that's possible. Like, it's just 5 highest ranked conference champs. And ideally, they would love it if the people who created the playoff would love it if the 5 highest ranked conference champs were actually ranked 1 through 5, but that's not going to happen. But
UNLV, I did actually have this thought though, because with how difficult it is getting in between 6 and 11, 5 and 11, like we all have been putting the Group of 5 champion at 12, and it's just kind of been like the automatic place for it. And I think it's within the realm of possibility that they're not 12.
If UNLV's undefeated, or Navy's undefeated. We'll talk about Navy and Army in a second too. But if UNLV's undefeated, there's a really good chance they're not going to be number 12. that they're going to be number 11 or number 10 or number 9. I don't know that they're going to go all the way up because their strength of schedule is not going to be good enough. But if Boise State keeps winning, like I believe they'll have to beat Boise State twice probably to be undefeated or to be the Mountain West champ. So,
hey, when Zach Wilson's last year at BYU, there was a game in November between two undefeated Group of 5 teams that was pandemonium. And I think it was a Friday night. Was it Coastal Carolina they were playing?
BYU.
And I was thinking to myself, like, if UNLV turns into that BYU team in terms of the hype that it got, the attention it was getting nationally, that there's no way that it's not a top 10 seed, in my opinion, especially if it runs the table. So, it's a safe place to put them right now. But the Group of 5, if a really, really good team emerges, and here's the thing, Andy, I am on high alert for Boise State to rework itself back into this conversation. I know that they lost to Oregon and it's easier to cast them aside right now, but I am on high alert for Boise State with Ashton Genty to potentially run the table here and be a legitimate team that can win a game or two in this thing. So
if they ran the table, you're probably talking about them beating UNLV twice. So that's helpful too.
Yeah. And then I think that it's possible too that the context of that Oregon game, as things go on, gets much better for them, and we're viewing Boise State as a legitimate tough out in this thing.
You think our bosses would be cool with us going to UNLV Boise State on a Friday night in Vegas? Because it's October 25th. It's a Friday night game. And then we just hang in Vegas for the next college football Saturday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I had a stroke. No, that would be the greatest single thing I could ever hear in my entire life. I hope that we could do that. And you and I just hitting the strip, watching some football, drinking some beers, eating some wings. I already posted, today's your birthday. It's my daughter's birthday too. You share a birthday. You guys are the two most important people in my life. And happy birthday, Andy. I would love to celebrate you in Las Vegas that day. Let's keep it on the radar. If they both keep winning, I think there's a legitimate case there to be made. And, it is even possible too. We'll have to look at the schedule. We could rent a car and drive from Vegas if USC is playing somebody that day or Arizona State's playing somebody that day.
We could have a reverse swingers.
Yes.
Where we go from Vegas to LA and back instead of yes.
And we can stop at the world's largest Chevron.
In the age of enlightenment, sir.
Have you ever seen the world's largest Chevron?
No, but I want to.
It's smaller than Buc-ee's, but there's a White Castle in it. It's right out on the way to LA from Vegas.
Beautiful. Speaking of great things and Vegas, our friends at Prize Picks, one of our great sponsors, we're going to talk about them. Best daily fantasy game in America. Play $5, get $50 instantly with the code STAPLES. And we always talk about Prize Picks in the context of college football, and by all means, as we get toward the college football weekend, I want you checking your Prize Picks app, making your plays. But hey, what a way to start your week. 2 Monday night football games this week. Prize Picks, liven up your first day of the work week. You got the Dolphins. You got the Titans. You got the Seahawks. It'd be a good game. It'd be a good set of games. And you can have some fun with Prize Picks early in the week, late in the week, because I want to remind you, it's not just college football. They've got every sport. So use the code STAPLES, play 5, get 50 instantly at Prize Picks. Ari, yes, that UNLV situation, we might make that happen. We will do some research. We will send a pitch to the bosses. We will make it look like we were very responsibly doing work when we probably aren't. But that's an idea. We spent all week talking about UNLV because the starting quarterback left over an NIL dispute. The reason I'm saying this is potentially very exciting is Haj Malik Williams comes in to replace Matthew Sluka and looked a lot better. He was awesome. Ricky White III, their star receiver, suddenly getting involved in the game because he has somebody actually throwing him the ball. So this could get very interesting. The other part that could get very interesting in the Group of 5, Army and Navy look awesome. Ari, can you imagine if Army and Navy play in the American Championship game, the playoff gets set, and then a week later they play the actual Army-Navy game?
That would be funny if everybody getting all mad that there could be 3 Ohio State Michigan games in the single season. It's like, did you not think about the potential of Army Navy playing twice? Did you not? And how about this, Andy? What about 3 times? Huh? Put them both in. I dare you.
Well, and here's your thing. You're Mr. Notre Dame. That Notre Dame's gonna run the table and make the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
They have to play Navy and Army. So that's not going to be a gimme. Neither one of those. And they have to play Army the week before they play USC. So this is all going to come down to some really interesting stuff. That Notre Dame USC game obviously could be a big playoff, you're in, you're out kind of game. Another game that I think is interesting, and let's go back to the ACC, because I did move Clemson up to I projected them as the ACC champ and had Miami in it as an at-large. I hate this because it feeds into the people who think it was have this conspiracy theory that the ACC rigged it for Miami, and that's why they reversed call at the end of the Virginia Tech game. I don't think it's rigged. I don't. But the best outcome for the ACC is Clemson keeps winning and Miami keeps winning, and then Clemson beats Miami in the ACC championship game. So you have a 12-1 Clemson ACC champ, a 12-1 Miami that would be definitely an at-large. That's how you get 2 teams in the playoff if you're the ACC.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't play in the regular season, right? So,
nope.
That's a really big dream scenario there. And quite frankly, I think potentially, I'm done saying teams are going to run the table, Andy, because it just doesn't happen.
You shouldn't.
It's just.
You just looked at the Notre Dame schedule and saw Army and Navy, and you're like,
right. Well, it's just like you look at the scoreboard every Saturday, and it's like in the middle of the week, you forget that every Saturday you look at a score and go, what? Like every Saturday, like it happens every week. And it's the thing that's beautiful about it is that you cannot project it on Wednesday. So, I think that there are a lot of teams here at play. We're going to start getting more and more information. And as we do, this might get easier. It might get harder, but the BYU thing, I ran into the same thing doing Bubble Watch. Like it's, who do you pick as the Big 12 champion? It's like Arizona wasn't even in my first 4 out last week, and now they go on the road and beat Utah. And, you've got Kansas State, who has beaten the crap out of Arizona, and Oklahoma State, who were 2 teams that we thought could win this conference. Like Kansas State has the best resume, but then they've also been blown out. Like it's impossible to do. So I give you a lot of credit. It's not easy.
It's going to be so much fun. We'll be wrong, but it'll be fun being wrong.